I'm going to share my screen here,
Yeah,
and hopefully you can see that. Is it right?
yeah, perfect.
All right. So thank you very much for having me. Sorry for the rough start. I'm here to talk about Gen AI in accounting and auditing. So a little bit of background about myself. I've been on the AI train now. Before even GPT-3 had come out, I was a very big fan of reading the OpenAI blog, followed it closely, and got on the Gen AI train pretty early. I currently teach Gen AI techniques in my graduate accounting and auditing course, as well as in an undergrad course focused on business analytics. So that's kind of where this material is going to come from. So before we start, I just want to say why Gen AI, right? Like why even bother listening to this presentation? And there's some obvious things, right? Like efficiency, you'll hear about that. And you'll hear about freeing up time to do more activities that add value to the business. But the less obvious thing is that I think it can make the impossible possible. Okay, you can do things that you just wouldn't be capable of doing without a year or two or three of training. And that's to me where the real value is coming from. Um, so that's what I'm going to kind of focus on today. So outline of today. So I already gave you the why Gen AI. Make sure you are interested in this presentation. We're going to go through some case studies I go over in my graduate course. So we're going to do basic accounting task here. It's a great one to show you how powerful Gen AI is with, because you all will know the task well. We're going to roll forward a trial balance and just tie out the account numbers to the financial statement. So this is something an auditor would do when they're given transactions and financial statements, analyzing uploaded data. And then I'll talk about some other use cases that are maybe a little bit more difficult to put into a PowerPoint, but still very powerful. And then I'll give you some tips on using Gen AI effectively, which is, most of those are coming from the article I published in Strategic Finance, along with Dr. Black from DePaul University. So tying out trial balance and financials. So basic scenario is client gives the auditor a list of transactions and financial statements, and the auditor wants to make sure, do they actually have all the transactions? Do they tie out to the financials? So obviously the audit test here is to basically compare the manually rolled forward, or I should say recomputed balances to the financial statements. And the assertions, we might say accuracy and completeness of the transaction list. And exceptions, of course, would be defined when there's a mismatch. The numbers don't tie out. So the basic steps in this process are as follows. We're going to roll forward that trial balance. And that uses, of course, the accounts on the general ledger. Then what are we going to do? We're going to aggregate those ledger accounts so that they match what's on the financial statements. As we all know, cash on the financial statements might correspond with a dozen different accounts at the general ledger level. And then we're going to flip the signs because, as we know, accounting numbers have debits and credits. The way that's represented in the system is that debits are positive, credits are negative. Of course, the liability section on financial statements doesn't list negative liabilities. It makes them positive. So we have to flip the signs where appropriate to match the financial statements. And then we're going to join together what we recalculated in the financial statements and see if it ties out. So conceptually pretty straightforward. Okay, I'll just say that the way KPMG has us teaching this is with Alteryx, which is it's a fantastic software. It lets you do data analytics with this like icon, point and click, all this kind of approach, right? But I'll just say it takes about, I would say 30 to 45 minutes minimum to get this done. Probably longer if you're not fluent with Alteryx. Okay. And the workflow in Alteryx, you can see I don't even have the whole thing displayed on the screen. Okay. It's so big. Okay. So how about ChatGPT? Okay. It turns out I did this. I actually added a little bit. I said 5 to 10 minutes. I actually think I could do it quicker with ChatGPT. Okay. So here's how I do it. I start out by saying to ChatGPT, what is a trial balance roll forward? So it turns out these models know things that they don't necessarily bring to bear on a task. So if you ask this question, it's going to say, oh, here's what a trial balance roll forward is. And in some sense, the model now knows what a trial balance roll forward is for all subsequent questions. And then I say, well, why don't you roll forward with the attached files? Okay. And it just nails it. My students couldn't believe it. We got the roll forward portion done in a minute, 2 minutes. Okay. From there, it's a little tricky because we have to, again, aggregate the balances in the general ledger so they match the financial statements. So we aggregate. Okay. Then I say join it with this other table. Okay. This other table is going to give me a connection between the account categories and the financial statements. I then ask it to flip the sign. And then I say join it with the financials and compute the variances. So you'll kind of see why I did it this way if we have time for the tips at the end. But what you end up getting is a table that looks like this. You can see it's sorted by the magnitude of the variance. And there is a bit of rounding issues with this data. It's synthetic data created by KPMG, so it doesn't perfectly tie out. But you can see it does identify one account, short-term investments, that has like a more than $1 difference, right? Wow, 5 to 10 minutes, we got that code done, okay? And so the benefit here is twofold, right? The benefit is twofold. Obviously, we did this quickly, and that's wonderful, right? We did this one task quickly. The less obvious benefit is that I've got Python code now. And I can download that Python code and I can run it every time I want to do this task. And that's very powerful, right? That's very powerful. So much like an Alteryx workflow, you can repeat the task as many times as you'd like. Now you might ask, well, I don't know Python, so am I out of luck? You can ask ChatGPT to explain each line of code, okay? And you will be able to understand what it did. You might have to take some time, right? But you can understand it. Now, what if you ask for an explanation and it still doesn't make sense to you? Here's a tip. You can say, explain it so that a high school student can understand. And then it will change the explanation to be more approachable, which is wonderful. And what if you still don't understand, right? You can say, explain it so a grade school student could understand. And eventually you can find that right level for yourself and maybe even work back up. Of course, it's worth putting the investment in to understand that Python code if you're going to use it over and over again, right? So put in that time to kind of study it, make sure you understand it, and then you have it available at your fingertips anytime in the future. So let's move to another example. This is recomputing inventory costs. So basically, same scenario, you're an auditor. But auditing gives great examples because obviously a system would do a lot of these calculations for a business, right? But auditors often have to recompute what the system does. So it's a really nice, it's a fruitful area to give like simple tasks that are good for presentations. But of course, the implications are much broader. So we're going to we're going to recompute cost of goods sold and ending inventory here. So we're going to test accuracy, completeness, and existence, depending exactly on what we know about the system and how these files were generated. Exceptions, of course, would occur when the recomputed amounts don't tie to the financial statements. So here are the basic steps. We're going to take a file with beginning inventory, purchases, and sales. We're going to append them. We're going to put them all together so we have one big file. From there, we're going to compute COGS and ending inventory for each store item combination. So this is a retailer with many stores, and they sell many different inventory items. So of course, COGS is calculated at the store item level. We're then going to sum the amounts across the store items, and that's going to give us the numbers for the financial statements that should tie out, okay? So Alteryx workflow, it turns out to be similar to the trial balance roll forward and tie out. It's quite large, and it's somewhat irritatingly tedious to construct, actually. It takes a lot of time to get it to work. Now, it turns out for FIFO, ChatGPT can answer this question in 3 prompts. Okay, I say, describe what FIFO is, right? Remember, it's important that you get that knowledge into the chat. So once ChatGPT describes FIFO, it knows what FIFO is, and all subsequent queries will account for the knowledge that's been retrieved. And then I say, compute it. Here are the files. Notice I have to tell it to do the store item level. If you don't tell ChatGPT that, it's going to think everything's the same inventory item. It does like the example you might see in like an accounting 101 class, what one store, one item. So you got to tell it, do it at the store item level. With that little bit of knowledge, it nails it. And then just say compute total. And then it will sum across all the records and it will give you the final answer that you can tie to the financial statements. Really cool thing too that I have my students do is I say, not only do we ask ChatGPT for the Python code so that we can compute inventory anytime we want, but I also say ask it for a graphical user interface. Ask it for a GUI. And so what students end up getting is a program that looks like this. So they double click an icon on their desktop and boom, up pops this window, and it has 3 files that they can click the browse button to go select. After they're done with that, they can say calculate totals, and then we'll give them inventory under FIFO. So again, not only is it reusable, but you could actually give this GUI to people who don't know anything about Python. As long as you put the work up front to make sure it's working appropriately, you can distribute this file and have people with much less experience than you use these little GUIs. And so I think this is kind of democratizing data analytics, right? And it's enabling like a citizen data analyst throughout an organization. So I think this is a very powerful use case. I have some students who made like a bubble that you can select FIFO, LIFO, average cost. So you can even get fancier than this, but this is kind of like the basic use case. Okay, so the last example I'm going to show you is using ChatGPT as a data analyst. This is a very powerful area. It's one I don't currently teach in my graduate class. I do it in my undergraduate class, and students are kind of blown away by what's possible with this. And this is really, really making the impossible possible here. So ChatGPT lets you upload files and analyze them. I should say this, I didn't have this in the presentation, but of course, if you wanted to use this with confidential information, you would have to sign up for the corporate account with ChatGPT so that they would protect your data. So with that caveat in mind, I'm doing this in class, so we're not using the enterprise accounts. We'll upload the files. And basically, this is going to allow someone with very little programming or even statistical knowledge to unleash machine learning methods via ChatGPT. I think what the most important thing is when using the data analyst is you need to be familiar with the basic steps of business analytics, okay? But I will just say that you can often bootstrap this by just, if you remember, we asked ChatGPT to describe a trial balance roll forward. And we also asked ChatGPT to describe inventory costing under FIFO. You can ask ChatGPT, please describe the steps for analyzing data. And it's going to put that in the window, right, the context window. And then again, it knows this. If you don't do this, it can make mistakes. So it's important that you either direct it or at least have it describe the appropriate steps for analyzing data. So for example, with the CRISP DM framework. Okay, that's a very useful framework that's out there. Okay, so I uploaded a data set with Airbnb data to ChatGPT, and it was pretty amazing. It actually created a data dictionary. It just read the column names, ID, price, neighborhood, accommodates, and it gave me a description of what it thought those things were. Of course, I wouldn't just go with what ChatGPT guesses. I would upload a data dictionary if you had it available to you. And then it would, in some sense, know what all the columns are. Pretty amazing it did so well in this case, though. Okay, then you can see the prompt is on the right here. I just said, can you visualize the relation between the number of guests a listing can accommodate and the nightly price? Of course, I think we all have the intuition that if you can accommodate more guests, you're going to be able to charge a higher price on the market. Okay, and I look at the scatter plot and I don't see that relationship, right? It's not obvious to me that these things are positively correlated. So one thing you could do is say, add a trend line. Right? Just ask ChatGPT to add a trend line, and then it's going to add that trend line relating the two. Of course, you can do this sort of thing in like a Tableau or Power BI, but I've got this analysis done less than 5 minutes, right? And I can keep iterating very, very quickly with this data analyst tool. Okay, so that's another very powerful use case, analyzing data. Okay. You can get more sophisticated. It's not just a simple scatter plot with a trend line. You can do something like use a random forest to predict the price of a listing using the other columns, or you could describe specific columns. And a random forest would allow you to make predictions that turn out to be a lot more accurate than just a trend line. If you're not familiar with random forests, they're a very, very powerful tool in statistics and machine learning. It turns out ChatGPT kind of knows the entire machine learning pipeline when you ask it to do this. So it splits the data in the train and test split. It fits the model and it estimates out of sample performance automatically off the shelf. You just ask for it and it does it. In contrast, most of my students need to complete my entire graduate course before they have, a good idea of how to do this. So again, you're really making the impossible possible by using these tools. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the the use cases I teach for Gen AI in my classes. I hope this inspires you to think of use cases that are relevant to your job, right? And I promise you they are there, okay, once you know what's possible. I'll give you some other use cases that you may have heard about that I think are interesting. The big four accounting firms are using an LLM to take a process narrative, right? So they go with the client, they interview employees, and they walk through a business process, and they write it up as a narrative. Okay. And now we know the next step is to go into the office and draw a systems flow chart, convert that verbal representation into a graphical one. And that can take quite a bit of time. It turns out LLMs are pretty darn good at that. So you can drop in this process narrative and their proprietary LLM, that is the big four, and just ask for the systems flow chart. And it pretty much just gets you 90% of the way there, 95% of the way there. And then your job is just to review it and make edits as needed. So that's a very powerful use case. Other ones are natural language processing to give you a feel for these. It's pretty good at translation. So if you give it one language, you ask it to translate to another, it's pretty good at that. It's great at summarizing text. So if you have a 30-page article and you just want to know the gist of it, you can say, summarize this text. It's pretty good. It will correct grammars and typos. So if you write something, by the way, I find it's not very good at writing for you, by the way. I think it's quite bad at writing, contrary to what you might hear, but it's very good at correcting typos and grammar. So you write something up, you ask for this correction, and it pretty much nails it. You know, a tip I give my students in my class is I say, ask ChatGPT to give you a Word file you can download. And it's as simple as just asking, so give me a Word file with that text. And then you can use that compare feature in Word, and it will actually add edits, and it will tell you what ChatGPT has changed. And then you can go through the edits systematically and decide, is this something I actually want to change, right? What else? This is kind of an interesting use case. You might have a very long article that includes numerical data. So it might give statistics on the economy or some industry that you're interested in, right? And you might want to extract that numerical information because it's useful to you. It turns out a very good use case for ChatGPT is you can give it one of these news articles and then say, give me a table, right? Give me a table that extracts all of the facts and figures from this article. And it does a very wonderful job with that. It's quite impressive. And that'll save you a lot of time. And I'll say too, making the impossible possible, I guess that's not totally orthogonal to saving time, right? Because this is something that you maybe just wouldn't even bother doing because it would take too long. And now you're opening up a whole bunch of, value add activities that you couldn't do otherwise. And then another good one here is automating tasks with Python scripts. I'll give you some examples. When I was a practicing accountant, I worked at a company where they would get these comma-separated value files out of the system, and they would ask me to split them up. I was an intern, right? So I would spend a considerable amount of time, maybe once a month, splitting up these files. Well, that is so silly to do manually, right? You can just ask for a Python script, and it does it within 10 seconds after you've got that script written. And also you can even use it for editing PowerPoint slides. So if you wanted to change the images in your slides, you can actually ask for a Python script that will help you do that. Okay, so I'll finish with some tips on using Gen AI. I've already kind of sprinkled these throughout the presentation, but I'll kind of give you some more, go through them systematically. So what you have to know about LLMs is they predict one token at a time without planning. So the corollary here is that you as the user have to do the planning. You can't expect it to be thinking ahead because it's only thinking one step at a time. They do not always use what they know. Like the ChatGPT knows what a trial balance is, but if you don't ask it to explain it, it might not spontaneously use that information. So make sure you ask it to describe something. They're good at explaining things. So like explain the Python code that we went over that example earlier. They're great at taking perspectives. So, and I went over those examples too, like explain it like a high school kid, so a high school student could understand. And they also behave surprisingly like humans. It turns out if you offer a large language model a bonus, it will do better. The performance will go up. And in fact, this is kind of a creepy example. There's a conference paper that told LLMs to take a deep breath and think before they answered, and the accuracy went up, which is eerily similar to maybe what a human might do, right? What else? I have a few more. Don't ask ChatGPT to write code without uploading documents. It turns out to just be vastly more efficient to just give the model what it needs, and then ask it to make edits or use the information in the documents. It's not only data that you can upload, you can also do documents. For example, you could upload a tax code and ask it questions about the tax code, and it would be pretty good at finding the relevant sections. Another tip, provide file names, right? So if you can't upload something, tell the model what the file name is so that you don't have to change the code later. Just tell it and it will write it perfectly with the name you've given. Ask for downloadable files. So a lot of people will copy and paste. Just ask it to give you a file, download it, and then you have it, right? That can be Python scripts, Word files, Excel files, or anything. And I would just give one word of caution: be prepared to iterate. So when you first start using this, you're not going to have a good feel for how to get what you need. And so you're going to have to try several times and you'll get a feel for it. And then the next task, you'll be much quicker. Okay. And I'll just, on that too, I will just say, I think the best use case for LLMs is often generating reusable code. So in that case, it's worth putting a little bit more time in, right? Even if it's slightly longer than you would take to do this task in Excel, once you get that code, you can do it over and over again. So that's a huge benefit. I'll just say too, know what's possible with Python scripts. So what I did for this is I bought this automating the boring stuff with Python, and I just looked through what the topics were because I didn't even know what Python could do, right? And just this book gave me so much inspiration for ways I could increase my productivity. And of course, there are many other books like this too. And this is really where you can make the impossible possible too. So that's all I have today. I hope you kind of see what these models can do, and you can think of use cases for your business. Thank you very much, everyone.